a question that seems simple, yet is full of mystery. Have you ever sat alone gazing into the distance and suddenly asked yourself, "What am I thinking about?" Then felt something odd as if you were not thinking at all? Or sometimes when someone asks what you are thinking, you answer right away, "Oh, nothing." And then in some moment you ask yourself about that nothing. What is the mind like then? What am I thinking when I think nothing? At first glance, the question sounds like wordplay, even a joke. If there is no thinking, how could there be thinking? But if we pause for a moment and do not brush it off as a joke, we will see that the question hides something very profound. It opens a small door into the inner world, into the nature of thought, and into our very consciousness. Day by day, we live in a stream of unceasing thoughts. As soon as we wake up, we think of work, of breakfast, of yesterday, of what needs doing today. While working, one thought follows another without end. At night before sleep, the mind still thinks on and on about what has passed, what is unfinished worries and hopes. So when we say, "I am not thinking," is the mind truly at a stop, or is it merely slipping into the dim room of the unconscious without our noticing? When we think nothing, is the mind a blank sheet, empty and void, or is something still quietly operating within? In fact, what do you think when you think nothing is not just a playful quip among friends, but a basic question that many meditators, philosophers, and even scientists of mind have faced? The question carries a paradox. If there is no thinking, how could there be thinking? And if there is no thinking, do we still know that we exist? What knows that we are not thinking? And is that knowing itself a subtle form of thinking we have not yet recognized? In the meditative tradition, especially in the Buddha's teaching, many discourses speak of the mind's continuous operation. Mental events never truly stop, like flowing water, a monkey swinging from branch to branch, or a flame that keeps burning. In each instant, the mind is arising and passing away. One thought arises and falls, then a new sensation, a new image, a new imagination appears. Even when we think we are not thinking, has the mind become completely still? Or is it only that coarse, distinct thoughts are absent for a time while subtler movements continue to run quietly, too fine for our mindfulness to catch? If we cannot answer this, we may live under the delusion that thinking nothing is liberation, a moment beyond all worry. But misunderstood, that nothing can be a mistake, a hazy, unmindful state, not at all the serenity the Buddha taught. Some, when sitting in meditation, try to stop thinking, forcing themselves into no thought, unaware that such suppression can lead to dullness, torpor, or a blank ignorance. They may take it for freedom, while it is only a kind of sleep within consciousness. For this reason, what do you think when you think nothing is no longer a joke? It opens a serious inquiry into the nature of thought, the capacity to observe the mind, and the presence of mindfulness. It challenges us. How do we know our own mental state? How do we distinguish a quiet mind full of wisdom from an empty mind lacking clarity? And if there is a state of no thought that still knows clearly and shines, what is it? Is it meditation, mindfulness, the pure knowing the Buddha pointed to? With these questions, we step into a deeper exploration of the inner life, not to theorize, but to truly understand how we are living. Then we will no longer be vague in those moments of no thought, but will know where we stand in the flow of consciousness. We will see that thinking nothing, thinking something can be either drifting or awakening, and what separates the two is wisdom, the presence of awareness. If you are ready, we will move to the second part where we begin to explain the no-thought phenomenon in everyday life and gradually reveal the subtle nature of the mental stream. In daily life, there are many times when we feel as if our mind is empty, thinking nothing at all. Such moments often arise when we are tired or tense or right after a strong emotion, when the mind suddenly turns quiet, even freezes for a while. Sometimes we sit before the computer screen, stare at a passage, and the head holds not a single thought, or we are walking eyes ahead with no memory of what we are thinking. When someone asks, "What are you thinking about?" the instant answer is, "Oh, nothing." Everyone has lived through such situations. The question is, in those moments, is the mind truly empty, or do we simply fail to notice what we are thinking? In truth, most of the time the mind is still active, but our attention is not strong enough, or the thoughts are too subtle and too fleeting for us to register them. It is like entering a room where a fan is humming softly. At first, we do not notice the sound and feel as if there is nothing to hear. When we stop and listen carefully, the sound is still there. We simply were not aware of it. The mind is the same. In the moments we take to be no thought, there may still be currents of feeling faint recollections or passing whispers of thought, like a light breeze not strong enough to become clear thinking. Thus, the sense of emptiness does not mean the mind has stopped working. Another example: you sit in a room and suddenly feel as if time has stopped. You do not know what you are doing or thinking, but then looking back, you realize you had been caught in a vague sadness or a hidden anxiety. Perhaps your mind was not talking to itself in any clear way, yet there were emotions, memories, or some unconscious analysis still operating. Scientists call this the default mode network of the brain, the activity that continues when we are not focused on a specific task. That is, even when thinking nothing, brain regions related to memory, self-narrative, and association still run quietly. This aligns closely with the Buddha's teaching in the Samyutta Nikaya. In one discourse, the mind is likened to a smoldering fire. It is not always in open flame, yet there is an abiding presence. The flame may subside, but is not necessarily extinguished. So too with the mind. It may not give rise to coarse thoughts, clear inner speech, and images. Yet subtle activities are still unfolding, such as feeling faint imaginings or latent tendencies. In meditative language, these are subtle mental formations, the minute movements of mind that ordinary people seldom detect visible, only when mindfulness becomes refined. Another important point is that we often confuse thinking nothing with not remembering what we were thinking. We may have just passed through a brief chain of thoughts, and then right afterward the mind becomes hazy, and we cannot recall what we were thinking, like when we have just woken from a dream and feel that we dreamed something but cannot remember the content. Likewise, the stream of thought may already have flowed on, and because mindfulness was not following it, we get the impression that we were not thinking at all. In fact, the mind was active, only there was no recording of it. Moreover, the state of thinking nothing can also occur when the mind sinks into sloth and torpor, a sluggish, dim, and unalert condition. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the discourse on the foundations of mindfulness, the Buddha teaches that we must recognize mental states such as sloth and torpor, restlessness, and sleepiness. These states make the mind unclear and unable to distinguish, which leads to the feeling of thinking nothing. The Buddha emphasized that this is not meditative concentration, not proper stillness, but a sleepy condition of mind that should be recognized and overcome. Therefore, when in daily life we feel that we are not thinking, several possibilities may be present. First, the mind is working, but we are not alert enough to notice it. Second, the mind has fallen into dull torpor. Third, the mind is moving at a subtle level, not clear enough to become coarse thought. It may also be that in certain special cases, the mind is truly quiet, abiding in the present without producing discursive thought. That is the meditative state, which we will analyze later. From this analysis, we see that the feeling of thinking nothing is not simple. It can be a sign of confusion, yet it can also be an early sign of the mind settling. The distinction lies here. Are we mindful? Do we clearly know which state we are in at that moment? If there is mindfulness, then even when there is no thinking, we still know that clearly. If awareness is absent, then thinking nothing is merely drifting in a dark area of the mind. Right here, the question, what do you think? When you think nothing, rings like a bell urging deeper inquiry, because behind that emptiness there may be a whole world of mental activity. In the next section, we will look at the operating nature of mind, according to the Buddha's teaching, and see that the mind never stops like water, that never ceases to flow. In the Dhammapada, the very first verse, the Buddha declares a fundamental truth about mind. Mind precedes all things, mind is their chief, mind makes them. If one speaks or acts with an impure mind, suffering follows like the wheel follows the hoof of the ox. If one speaks or acts with a pure mind, happiness follows like a shadow that never leaves. This verse not only guides right conduct in daily life, it also reveals a deeper truth. Mind always goes first, always operates, and is the root source of everything. In other words, there is no state in which mind is absent, no moment in which it stops entirely like an insentient rock. The Buddha often likened mind to a stream that never stops, always flowing, arising, and passing in succession. In the Anguttara Nikaya, there is a vivid image. Mind is compared to a monkey that keeps swinging from branch to branch, never staying in one place. When mind clings to this image, then jumps to that sound, then grasps another idea, it is hard to call that thinking nothing, for in reality, mind is always initiating some mental event. Whether we notice it or not is another matter. Even in moments when we imagine the mind is empty and not thinking in the Buddha's teaching, the mind is still operating. It is simply operating at a subtler and deeper level that one without refined mindfulness will not perceive. In the Visuddhimagga, the path of purification, Buddha says that the mind moves faster than an electric current. It arises and ceases in each instant, without a pause, with no moment in which it stands still. In every second, the mind arises and ceases countless times like flashes of lightning that flare up and go out in continuous succession. Thus, mind is not a static block but a moving stream. In that stream, thoughts, feelings, and perceptions arise and pass away continuously. When we feel that we are not thinking, it may be that coarse thoughts are absent, while subtle mental processes remain, for example, a light sensation, a fleeting feeling, or a quiet, wordless knowing. That is still mental activity, not a complete stop. In the Majjhima Nikaya, in the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha instructs meditators to observe mind as follows: mind with greed and mind without greed, mind with aversion and mind without aversion, mind with delusion and mind without delusion, the collected mind and the distracted mind, the expansive mind and the constricted mind. This shows that the mind is always present in some state and is never completely empty. On careful observation, we see that the mind is sometimes scattered, sometimes gathered, sometimes filled with clear thoughts, sometimes holding only vague sensations. Yet there is always some state unfolding. At this point, we need to be clear. Thinking nothing does not mean there is no mind. It means there is no specific thought or distinct content in the mind. The knowing is still there. The mind is still functioning, only not in the usual pattern of words, images, or logical reasoning. It may be the mind in concentration, gathered into the present and no longer wandering, or it may be the mind sinking into torpor, dim and unclear. Both feel like no thought, yet their natures are entirely different. The Buddha warned about this in the Majjhima Nikaya, in the Samanaphala Sutta. Some non-Buddhist practitioners trained to reach the attainment of non-perception, where thinking and clear perception are absent, but the wisdom of awareness is lacking. He called that ignorance a blank state without the light of insight. The Buddha taught that thinking nothing is not the goal. Rather, the mind must be bright, mindful, clearly knowing, and unattached. That is liberation. So when we feel that we are not thinking, we should ask, is the mind bright at that moment? Is it alert? Is it clearly knowing? If yes, it is a form of tranquility, the fruit of mindfulness. If not, it is only a murky state like a cloud that covers the sun and makes us mistakenly believe the mind has stopped. From the Buddha's teaching, we see that the mind always operates. It never shuts down like a machine that has been switched off. Even in the most tranquil state, the mind still knows and is lucid. It simply no longer chases after delusive thoughts. Therefore, the question, what do you think when you think nothing, is an opportunity to look at that wordless knowing and the quiet presence of mind that is neither confused nor attached. In the next section, we will analyze the layers of thinking from coarse to subtle, to understand more clearly that thinking nothing is not necessarily there is nothing, but rather that a deeper layer of mind is present. There are many layers of thinking. To understand the question, what do you think when you think nothing, correctly, we need to analyze the nature of thinking more deeply, not from an abstract philosophical angle, but through direct observation of our own mind in each instant of daily life. The first point to establish is that thinking is not of just one kind. We usually only notice coarse thinking, that is, clear streams of ideas with images, inner speech, and complete sentences, as if we were talking to ourselves in the head. But beyond coarse thinking, there are subtle currents of thought, faint and light, like a vague passing feeling, like a silent impulse that has not yet had time to express itself in words. These subtle thoughts make up much of the mind's activity, and they are not easy to detect. Take a simple example. While walking down the street, sometimes you think clearly, "I'll stop by the grocery to buy something." Yet there are other times you walk without forming words at all. There is only a sense of direction, a quiet urge, no image and no wording, and still it leads you to the destination. When asked, "What are you thinking?" you might answer nothing. In truth, a hidden intention is operating within you. That is not thinking nothing but subtle thought that has not yet manifested as words. In meditation, this becomes very clear to practitioners. At first, the mind is full of coarse thoughts. "I'm breathing, so why isn't the mind calm? I must concentrate." Gradually, the coarse thoughts settle. The mind grows lighter, the inner speech falls away, and yet notions still skim by, such as pleasant or quiet, or even a gentle, nameless joy. If the meditator's mindfulness is deep, they will discern that subtle layer. If lucidity is lacking, they will mistake it for "I am not thinking at all." In fact, thinking is still occurring, only at a lighter frequency, not yet becoming words or concrete images. The Buddha taught this very clearly in the Majjhima Nikaya, in the discourse on vitakka and vichara. He distinguishes between vitakka and vichara, that is the initial directing of thought, and the continued examination of the object. When thinking is coarse, there is vitakka, the mind's aiming toward an object, and vichara, the mind's working upon that object. But upon entering concentration, both vitakka and vichara fall silent, and only joy and happiness, born of seclusion, remain, that is a gentle gladness and deep tranquility. Even then, there is still knowing, a quiet awareness without words. This is a refined layer of cognition. It is not thinking in the ordinary sense yet. It is not absolute thoughtlessness. In the Visuddhimagga, Buddhaghosa divides mental activity into 4 levels: coarse, medium, subtle, and tranquil. Coarse is clear thinking and inner speech. Medium is emotion and hazy imagery. Subtle is fleeting notions and intentions not yet formed. Tranquil is a state of bright stillness without the arising of discursive thought. Thus, when we say "I am not thinking," we usually mean the coarse layer is absent, while the medium and subtle layers are still present. Because mindfulness is weak, we fail to see them. Even in modern psychology, it is acknowledged that the mind operates on many levels. Consciousness is only the tip of the iceberg, the part that knows what it is thinking. Beneath it are the subconscious and the unconscious contents that are not clearly manifest, yet still influence our actions, emotions, and decisions. Thinking nothing may mean that conscious thought has paused while the subconscious is still at work. What is called thinking nothing is sometimes merely not knowing what one is thinking. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha teaches one is clearly aware when going forward, going back, sitting, lying down, speaking, and being silent. This means that even when there is no inner speech, there must still be awareness. That very awareness is a kind of subtle thinking, wordless and formless, yet clearly knowing. Therefore, thinking is not only words. It is also the functioning of knowing in the mind. When discursive thought is absent, knowing remains, and that knowing is the ground of all cognitions. In short, there are many layers of thinking: coarse, medium, subtle, and tranquil. Most of the time when we feel we are thinking nothing, only coarse thought has ceased while the subtle layer is still active. Without mindfulness, we will not know it. With deep mindfulness, we will see each moment of arising and passing. When the mind is truly tranquil, a bright, wordless knowing remains, which the Buddha calls right concentration, imbued with awakened knowing. In the next section, we will inquire more precisely: what is the empty state? Is it the intentional stillness of a concentrated mind, or the unconscious dimness of ignorance? How do we tell them apart? The state of thinking nothing is often felt as a kind of emptiness, silence, or a vast blank space in the mind. The question is, which kind of emptiness is it? Is it the genuine quiet of a mind established in concentration, or the hollow emptiness of a mind fallen into ignorance, subtle distraction, or even torpor? Recognizing the true nature of emptiness and delusion is crucial. On the path of practice, what seems calm may be deluded, and what seems like no thought may in fact be sinking into the murkiness of ignorance. First, we need to understand that in the Buddha's teaching, the mind has two principal modes. One mode is drawn along by defilements. The other is a mode of mindful abiding and lucidity. When led by defilements, the mind is often scattered and restless. That is the state of delusive proliferation, thinking aimlessly without control. There is another state that also lacks mindfulness. The mind is quiet in an unconscious way, with no clear discursive thought, yet also without wisdom. This the Buddha calls sloth and torpor, or a darkened mind. In the Sutta Nikaya, the Buddha says the mind is like space, but that space is not an unconscious void. It is a lucid space, with the capacity to reflect all phenomena. Ignorant emptiness, by contrast, is like a night without light. Nothing stands out. There is no discerning of true and false, good and bad, no knowing whether one is thinking or not. So when we speak of an empty mind, we must distinguish lucid emptiness from ignorant emptiness. In reality, many people drop into thinking nothing because the mind is tired and depleted, like a lamp running out of oil, its light flickering and going out. In such moments, the mind has no clear thoughts, but it also does not know anything. There is no mindfulness and no lucidity. This is the torpor the Buddha taught as a major hindrance on the path. Practitioners must recognize and overcome it rather than mistake it for meditation or liberation. By contrast, in a truly quiet mind, though there is no discursive thought and no words, there remains a clear knowing and inner brightness. The Buddha calls this right concentration, a unified mind suffused with mindfulness. In the Satipatthana Sutta, he teaches that a practitioner should know clearly when walking, standing, lying down, sitting, breathing in and breathing out. Even in silence, there is clear knowing. It is not knowing nothing. A practical example. You sit beneath a tree. There is no one around, no sound, no inner speech. Only a gentle breath, the cool touch of the breeze, and the presence of alertness. At that moment you are not thinking yet, you clearly know you are here. That is a quiet state with mindfulness. If you sit there tired and groggy, not knowing anything, that is unconscious emptiness. In meditation, many at first crave no thought, so they force the mind and suppress thinking, hoping to reach blank stillness. Lacking insight into the mind's nature, they easily fall into torpor or into a state where mental functioning is unclear, like sleeping while sitting. This is dangerous, for one may cling to it, imagining one has attained steadiness, when in fact one has fallen into a void and is making no progress. The Buddha teaches very clearly in the Majjhima Nikaya in the Samannaphala Sutta. There are people who reach the attainment of non-perception, in which clear perception is absent and there is no thinking. They take this to be liberation, but in truth it is only the absence of discursive thoughts, not the presence of wisdom. When such a person emerges from that attainment, the mind is still ignorant. Greed, aversion and delusion remain latent because there was no knowing awareness illuminating the mind while in that concentration. Therefore, blankness is not the goal. What the Buddha points to is clear, knowing without mental proliferation, lucid brightness within stillness. We must distinguish. A still mind with mindfulness is genuine concentration. A blank mind that knows nothing is delusion and an obstacle. Mindfulness helps us see this difference so that we do not fall into the trap of thinking nothing and imagine we are liberated. In short, the state of thinking nothing may be a mind covertly scattered. It may be a mind sunk in torpor, or it may be a mind collected and luminous. To know which it is requires continuous mindfulness and unbroken alertness. Only then do we truly see that one can think nothing yet still clearly know, still be fully present. In the next section, we will look more deeply into the Buddha's teaching on the mind's subtle agitation and how meditation allows us to discern what lies beneath what we call thinking nothing. When one enters the path of meditation, one of the first confusions is the sense of not thinking anything or being calm. Yet in a moment a new thought arises and then fades. The mind wavers now with thought, now without, and the practitioner wonders. When there is no clear thought, is the mind truly calm? Is this concentration? Or is the mind still agitated only at a subtler level? In the Sanyutta Nikaya, the Buddha uses the image of a river that never stops flowing to describe the mind. Sometimes the river swirls, sometimes it is smooth, yet the water keeps moving. The mind is the same. At times it is noisy with thoughts, at times seemingly still, yet the current of mental formations continues. One untrained in the mind only notices it when it is noisy. When it is quiet, that person assumes I am not thinking. In reality, the mind is arising and passing every instant. Only those subtle moments are too small and too fast to be seen. The old masters often compared delusive thoughts to dust in the air. When light shines in the dust is visible. When the light is dim, we think there is no dust. Likewise, when mindfulness is strong, we see thoughts as they arise. When mindfulness is weak, we assume the mind is quiet. Not seeing thought is not proof that the mind is calm. It may simply mean the light of mindfulness is not bright enough. Meditation strengthens mindfulness and alertness, which reveals the mind's subtle movements. At first, we notice coarse thoughts, memories of the past, plans for the future, clear emotions. As the mind settles, we notice lighter sensations and fleeting notions like passing clouds. Finally, when concentration is deep, we notice a quiet knowing without words or images, yet knowing is present. This is knowing that does not proceed through thinking but through awakened awareness. In the Majjhima Nikaya, in the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha teaches a refined way to observe mind. The meditator knows not only when there is thought, but also when there is no thought. They know when greed is present, and when it is absent, when the mind is collected, and when it is scattered. This means the practitioner sees the mind in each state, missing nothing and not being deceived. This is the power of subtle mindfulness, which distinguishes a truly calm mind from a mind that has merely dropped coarse thoughts. In the Visuddhimagga, Buddhaghosa analyzes how the mind can lack clear ideas, yet still operate through intention, inclination, and the cognitive process. The practitioner must see this. Otherwise, it is easy to assume that no thought means concentration has been achieved. In truth, concentration arises only when every intentional impulse falls silent. The mind abides in the present, and most importantly, mindfulness is still present. For example, when you meditate on the breath, at first the mind darts about thinking of this and that. As it begins to settle, you no longer hear inner speech. You may then assume you are not thinking yet. If you are alert, you will notice a gentle stream of mind that knows the breath and registers bodily sensations. That knowing itself is the mind in operation, not the mind switched off. Without alertness, you will mistake this for no thought and sink into a dim state. Meditation reveals that subtle thinking is the continuous functioning of awareness. Even without words or images, there is presence. That presence is not blankness. It is a purified mind in which discursive thought does not arise and clarity remains. The Buddha calls this a concentrated mind established in mindfulness and not led around by delusion. There is a Zen anecdote. A monk asked a master, "When there is nothing in the mind, what do you think?" The master replied, "I think by that which is beyond thinking." This is not wordplay. It points directly to the knowing nature, the awareness that does not proceed through thought and is present when the mind is free of agitation. In sum, meditation discloses a truth about mind. There is no state in which the mind completely stops functioning. What there is instead is the absence of coarse proliferation, while clear mindful knowing remains. When we see the mind's subtle motions, we no longer mistake. Thinking nothing for nothing is there, but understand it as a still, formless, wordless, knowing the ground of insight. In the next section, we will distinguish more clearly between non-perception and right concentration, between thinking nothing in a wrong path and thinking nothing in awakening, so that we do not fall into the trap of ignorant blankness. When people hear about thinking nothing, many imagine a mind that is completely blank, with no perception and no idea, like a blank sheet of paper or even like sleep. In the Buddha's teaching, however, thinking nothing can appear in two opposite forms. One is the state of non-perception, where there are no ideas and no clear perception, yet wisdom is absent. The other is right concentration, where there are no discursive thoughts, yet there is bright mindfulness without confusion. If this distinction is not made, practitioners easily go astray thinking they are stable in concentration when in fact they have fallen into ignorance and are making no progress toward liberation. In the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, the Buddha recounts how some ascetics cultivate non-perception, reaching a state without feeling and without clear perception, and take it as liberation. In reality, it is only a conditional stoppage of mental activity, not the unconditional freedom taught by the Buddha. Such people suppress the arising of thoughts, emptying the mind of content, but mindfulness and clarity are not present. In the end, it is a kind of escape, a refusal to face truth. The Buddha makes it clear that non-perception does not lead to liberation because when the attainment ends, defilements still exist and the roots of greed, aversion, and delusion remain. He likens non-perception to a stone sunk under water. The surface is not seen yet, the stone has not dissolved. Right concentration as taught by the Buddha is entirely different. It is a quiet mind that is bright and clear. Discursive thoughts do not arise yet, the nature of phenomena is seen. There is no falling into ignorance. In the Samannaphala Sutta, the Buddha describes the stages of concentration that noble ones develop from the first jhana to the fourth, and then to the formless attainments, such as the base of infinite space and the base of infinite consciousness. In these attainments, the mind is tranquil and free from coarse thoughts, yet clear knowing is present. One knows one is abiding in concentration and does not fall into dimness. Highest is the attainment of the cessation of perception and feeling, where all coarse feeling and perception cease. Because wisdom is fully matured upon emerging, one realizes liberation and is no longer subject to rebirth. The core difference between non-perception and right concentration lies in whether wisdom is present. In non-perception, the mind does not think, yet mindfulness is absent. One does not know where one is or what one is doing, like a person in deep sleep. In right concentration, the mind does not think, yet it clearly knows that it is not thinking, and there is a bright, unmoving, abiding awareness. This is the foundation of liberation. The Buddha teaches in the Satipatthana Sutta to be clearly aware when going forward and back, when standing, sitting, lying down, and when breathing in and out. This is moment-to-moment mindfulness. Even when the mind does not give rise to thoughts, one still knows that one is living and present. This is the life of knowing awareness, not the empty blankness of ignorance. In meditation, a practitioner may encounter a state of no thought that feels very calm and very light. Without alertness, one may mistake this for concentration and cling to it as a pleasant comfort. This is a subtle trap on the path, an attachment to blankness that forgets that liberation is not an escape from thinking, but a clear seeing of the nature of thought, a non-clinging to thought, so that the mind naturally becomes still and bright. For this reason, the Buddha teaches that right concentration is not the forced absence of thinking. It is the natural result of letting go. When there is no clinging, discursive thoughts settle by themselves, while knowing awareness remains fully present. The mind does not think yet. It clearly knows it is not thinking. This is pure knowing that does not discriminate, does not cling, and does not create karma. In summary, no thought can be non-perception, which is an ignorant blankness without mindfulness, or it can be right concentration, which is a quiet mind without discursive thought that is still lucid and clearly knowing. A practitioner must examine carefully to avoid confusion and not fall into dead blankness, but aim for the emptiness that still knows and the silence that still shines, which is the unborn knowing that the Buddha realized. In the next section, we will analyze more closely the trap of no thought, why many people become enamored of that state, taking it for peace, while it is only the sleep of the mind far from liberation. On the path of insight, meditation, or mindfulness practice, there is a subtle snare that many have fallen into. It is the fascination with the state of no thought, drifting into a sense of emptiness that seems quiet while the mind is actually dozing. This is when one sits still with no distinct discursive thought, no strong emotions, no inner sounds, and assumes one is tranquil. In truth, the mind is sinking into torpor and losing the energy of alert awareness, like a person who is not yet fully asleep, but is half awake and half dreaming. In daily life, this phenomenon often occurs without our noticing. There are times we sit for hours watching a film and nothing remains afterward. The mind feels blank, with no thinking and no clarity. At other times, we sit in a room, doing nothing with the head suspended, in a vague state, no clear thought, and no clear knowing of what we are doing. In such moments, we easily say we are not thinking. But ask this: is the mind bright then? Is it fully present? If not, that is the ignorant emptiness of blankness, not mindful quiet. In the Majjhima Nikaya, in the Kulata Sutta, the Lesser Emptiness Discourse, the Buddha describes the emptiness realized by the Noble Ones as an emptiness where discursive thought is absent, but wisdom and mindfulness are present. By contrast, he warns of sloth and torpor, which practitioners easily mistake for a calm mind. This is the trap of ignorant emptiness, taking not thinking for not knowing. The mind is numbed in a false quiet, like someone sleeping without realizing they are asleep. This trap is attractive because it feels pleasant, like an escape from affliction and pain. When we are anxious and troubled, stumbling upon a state of no thought seems like freedom. The Buddha is clear: escape is not liberation. If we only fall silent without facing and clearly knowing our experience, we merely forget pain for a while. We do not uproot it. It is like a patient taking anesthesia to forget pain. In the stupor there is no pain, yet the illness remains. In the state of no thought without alert awareness, we only numb the mind. We do not transform it. We do not end defilements. It is a temporary comfort that does not lead to freedom. The Buddha often likens sloth and torpor to moss covering the surface of water, which robs the mind of its clear reflection. A practitioner must recognize these states as thieves slipping into the house at night. They make no noise, yet quietly ruin the inner work. The Buddha teaches diligence and alert guarding of the gates, not allowing the mind to fall into no thought without clarity. Beginners often fear thinking and fear discursive mind, so they try to stop the mind by force and end in torpor. When they see no thought, they rejoice and cling, believing it to be concentration. In truth, this is a delusion, the mark of a mind that is weak and lacking the power of mindfulness. When mindfulness is strong, the mind needs no force. It rests naturally in quiet, while clearly knowing each breath, each sensation, and each moment. That is the silence of awakening, not the silence of stupor. A simple example: a stressed person seeks sleep to escape worry. While asleep, there is no thinking and also no knowing. On waking, the troubles remain. In the same way, a person who hides in a state of no thought to avoid life and pain cannot go far on the spiritual path. The Buddha teaches direct encounter with reality, without running away, without seeking refuge in ignorant emptiness. Mindfulness lets us recognize the true state of mind and keeps us from being deceived by a feeling of quiet. Quiet without alert awareness is a deep trap that holds the mind in darkness. Only when alert awareness is present does no thought become a pure and undefiled mind, free of attachment, leading to liberation. In short, no thought can be a gateway to liberation or a pit of ignorance. The deciding factor is the presence of alert awareness. If alert awareness is present, no thought means the mind abides in knowing. If alert awareness is absent, no thought is the sleep of the mind, an evasion of suffering through heedlessness. In the next section, we will ask when no thought is truly the right meditative state, and what signs show that the mind is established in concentration, free from discursive thought, yet still lucid. After analyzing blankness, subtle agitation, and the trap of ignorant torpor, a fair question arises. Is there a time when the mind truly has no thought and yet remains clearly aware? Is there a state in which all currents of discursive thought fall silent, while the mind remains distinctly present and bright? And if so, when does that occur? The answer lies in the Buddha's teaching on genuine meditation, especially the form realm and formless realm jhanas, where the mind no longer initiates new thoughts, yet knowing remains fully present. In the discourse on the first jhana, in the Majjhima Nikaya, for example, the Samannaphala Sutta, the Buddha describes a step-by-step meditative process that leads to the quieting of the mind. When a practitioner gathers the mind and lets go of sensual desires and unwholesome states, the mind becomes collected, and the first jhana arises, marked by rapture and happiness born of seclusion together with vitakka and vichara, that is, the gentle directing of attention and the subtle examination of the object. Continuing the practice vitakka and vichara, the activities of initiating and sustaining thought grow quiet, and the practitioner enters the second jhana, where rapture and happiness are born of concentration, and there is no more vitakka, vichara. Here, coarse thinking has ceased, yet the mind is clearly knowing, suffused with inner joy and deep stability. At this point, we can say the mind is not thinking, but it is not an unconscious blankness. It is stillness that is bright and lucid. Going deeper into the third and fourth jhana's stillness becomes more purified. Joy is gradually refined into equanimity and purified mindfulness. The mind is free of all agitation, yet fully awake. The Buddha describes the fourth jhana as purity of mindfulness, due to equanimity, meaning the mind has completely let go, does not initiate new thoughts, yet mindfulness remains. It is not discriminative thinking, but a pure knowing. This is not thinking in the true meditative sense. There is no discursive thought, yet there is clear knowing. In the Visuddhimagga, Buddhaghosa explains that in the jhanas, coarse imaginings settle, but knowing of the meditation object remains, whether that object is the breath light or a meditation sign, depending on the method. That knowing does not proceed through words or through clear images. It is a wordless clarity. In such moments, the mind does not think, yet it is fully present, neither dull nor blank. However, even without deep absorption, a meditator can experience brief periods of not thinking. In moments when the mind falls into a natural pause, for example, while observing the breath as discursive thoughts, stop for a time. If mindfulness is strong, one clearly knows that the mind is without thoughts, knows one is sitting, breathing, yet does not need to think. This is a gentle moment of meditative quiet. It is not advanced absorption, but it is the seed of concentration. The Buddha teaches in the Satipatthana Sutta, when breathing in long, one knows one is breathing in long, and when breathing out short, one knows one is breathing out short. This is knowing that does not rely on thinking, analysis, or words, yet it clearly knows each movement of body and mind. At such a time, the mind is not thinking yet, it is filled with alert awareness. A familiar example: you sit quietly in the shade of a tree, not thinking yet. You clearly feel the cool breeze, hear the rustle of leaves, and sense the gentle rhythm of the breath. You are not thinking yet, you are fully present. This is not thinking yet, still knowing meditation in daily life. Thus, the mind is truly not thinking only when discursive proliferation is silent and alert awareness is present. This can be in the depths of the jhanas, or in moments of strong mindfulness in ordinary life. The essential point is this: not thinking yet, not asleep, not lost, not blank, but bright at ease and light. In short, genuine not thinking occurs when the mind is settled free of discursive thought, yet still mindful. This is the aim of meditation and what the Buddha taught. It is not a matter of forcing the mind to stop, but of cultivating mindfulness so that discursive thoughts naturally settle and knowing becomes present. In the next section, we will clarify further. What do you think when you think nothing? What does wisdom illuminate in that state? Is there something that is still thinking without words? And what is that knowing? In meditation, this is described with the term knowing nature, also called awakened knowing original mind, Tathagata store or Dharma body, depending on the tradition. It is knowing without form, not mediated by concepts, not limited by language, without discrimination, yet utterly clear, free of torpor and dimness. When the mind is not thinking yet fully present and lucid, This knowing nature is operating and illuminating, not through thought and not through inner speech. The Buddha did not use knowing nature as a fixed philosophical term, but he pointed directly to this experience through meditation. In the Majjhima Nikaya, in the Bhattacharya Sutta, he teaches, do not chase after the past or long for the future, dwell awake in the present. Thus the noble one lives at ease. Here, not chasing does not mean not knowing. It means not clinging to proliferations about past and future, not being swept away while clearly knowing the present in its fullness. Therefore, when there is no thinking, if the mind clearly knows the reality at hand, seeing body, feeling, mind and phenomena, arising and passing, that knowing is precisely the light of wisdom, a wordless insight. It is not thinking in the usual sense with a subject, an object and reasoning. It is the immediate reflection of what is with no concepts inserted. For example, you sit quietly with no thoughts, yet you clearly know you are breathing, know where you sit, know the sensations in the body, and know the stillness in the mind. All of this knowing requires no words and carries no images, yet it is complete cognition. This is knowing that does not proceed through thinking, not through I am thinking. If someone asks, what are you thinking? You can answer, I am not thinking, but I clearly know everything that is occurring. This is pure knowing, formless and imageless, yet present and illuminating moment by moment. Zen expresses this succinctly. Do not search elsewhere. Return to the knowing that knows without discursive mind. This knowing does not judge or compare. It illuminates everything like sunlight, without choosing, simply shining. From the perspective of insight, we see that thinking is not always verbal thought. There is a deeper mode of thinking, a present illumination that is immediate and wordless. The Buddha teaches that when the mind is bright, pure and undefiled, happiness follows like a shadow that never departs. Such a clear mind is not a dead and inert quiet. It is a non-clinging illumination that gives rise to no discursive thought, yet knows all things clearly. Therefore, when we are not thinking and a lucid knowing is present, we are thinking by way of the knowing nature, by the light of insight. This is not discursive thought, it is full presence, the immediacy of awareness. Conversely, without that alert awareness, thinking nothing is only darkness, an ignorant blankness with no transformative value. In short, what do you think when you think nothing? The answer is, you think by the quiet illumination of knowing, wordless, imageless, without thought, yet clearly aware of reality and not falling into forgetfulness. This is a knowing that does not come from thinking. It arises from mindfulness and alert awareness and is the foundation of insight, meditation, and liberation. In the next section, we will step into actual practice and lived experience. How do we recognize that state? How do we live with thinking nothing while remaining alert? After a deep analysis of layers of mind, we need to return to concrete practice. No matter how refined a theory is, if it does not bear fruit in the inner life, it remains empty words. The question now is, how do we recognize the state of thinking nothing in an alert way? How do we know when the mind is truly calm, not producing discursive thought without dullness and without self-deception? More importantly, how do we sustain that alertness in each moment of reality? First, we need to see clearly that meditation is the most direct path for the mind to return to stillness, and thereby to see clearly the streams of discursive thought and also the moments when the mind does not initiate them. The practitioner begins with a specific object, such as the breath, the steps, or bodily sensations. When the mind is still scattered, coarse thoughts arise continuously. I am sitting right. Why is the mind not calm? I breathe in and out, yet why is there no ease? This is the easily seen coarse layer of thinking. Gradually, if mindfulness is steadily maintained, the mind begins to release coarse thought and shifts to simple sensing. Knowing the in-breath, knowing the out-breath, knowing the gentle sensations in the body. There are no words in the mind and no clear imagined images. At that point, we begin to feel as if we are not thinking at all. The mind is light, empty, pleasant. Do not rejoice too soon because this is an easy threshold for misunderstanding. The practitioner needs alert examination. In that moment of not thinking, do you clearly know you are here? Do you know the breath, the sensations of the body, the quietness? If yes, then knowing awareness is present within the stillness. If not, if you only feel vague, drifting, and unclear, you may have slipped into light torpor, a quiet state that lacks alertness. One sign that the mind is collected is this: the mind does not need words to know yet, it still knows clearly. For example, you feel the in-breath without needing to remind yourself, this is an in-breath, and you still know it clearly. You hear a sound in the distance without naming it birds traffic, you simply know that there is a sound. This is wordless, non-discriminative knowing that remains bright and does not drift. The Buddha called this mindfulness with equanimity and present clear knowing. If instead you find the mind quiet but unclear whether you are breathing or not, unclear where the body is, that is a sign that alertness has weakened and you are sinking into ignorant blankness. In that case, you are not thinking, but you also do not know, like sleeping in a sitting posture. This is not meditation. It is a mind veiled by torpor and sleepiness. A useful practice is walking meditation slow and mindful. While walking, you do not need to think, but you know clearly that the feet are moving. You know the contact of the soles with the ground. You know the feel of wind, light, and sound. In that moment, there is no thinking, yet the mind is clear, alert, and at ease. This is not thinking with alert awareness. It is entirely different from walking in a daze, walking without knowing you are walking with the head vague and drifting. Practicing mindfulness in daily life also helps you recognize that state. When washing dishes, eating, or bathing, you do not need to think. You only need to know clearly what you are doing and to feel fully each movement and each sensation. Then the mind is not dragged by discursive thought. You think nothing, yet awareness is full. You will feel a gentle happiness that comes from nowhere because the mind is not scattered and not attached. Another sign that shows alert awareness within not thinking is this: when a discursive thought arises, you notice it immediately and you are not carried away by it. This shows that knowing awareness is operating and ready to recognize the mind. By contrast, if you only notice that you have been carried away after a long time, you may have fallen into blankness without alert awareness, which lets the mind be pulled around without knowing it. In sum, recognizing the alert form of not thinking is essential in meditation. It is not about seeking a blank state. It is about living fully with wordless knowing, precisely aware of the present without attachment. This is the foundation of peace and liberation. Meditation is not thinking. It is knowing, thought clearly, and when thought subsides, knowing that stillness clearly, recognizing mistaken states and the avoidance of thinking. On the path to inner peace, many people, whether unintentionally or deliberately, turn to not thinking as a way to avoid suffering. They feel besieged by work pressure, anxiety about the future family conflict, and painful emotions. In their fatigue, they want rest, not merely physical rest, but rest of mind, a halt to the thoughts that trouble them. That is legitimate. However, if misunderstood, that rest can turn into avoidance, and not thinking becomes a shell covering an untransformed interior. In reality, many seek meditation as a means to switch thought off, like a patient seeking sleeping pills. They believe meditation is not thinking blankness, the stopping of all analysis and reflection. They try to force the mind not to think using willpower to stop every current of thought. The result: some fall into fatigue, heavy-headedness, and inner strain because they have forced the mind too hard. Others fall into torpor, dimness, and lack of alert awareness, as analyzed earlier. More dangerous still, some become satisfied with the state of not thinking, take it as liberation, and no longer wish to face the real issues of their lives. They tell themselves, there is no need to think much about anything. Let everything pass. I only need not thinking to be at peace. The psychology of avoidance is wrapped in the shell of meditation, but in truth it is escape from suffering, not the ending of suffering. They do not face the inner life or investigate the roots of greed, aversion, and delusion. They merely suppress thought, seek a pleasant blankness, and settle in it as a refuge. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha teaches that no one can cleanse dirt by covering it with a veil. Likewise, inner suffering cannot be resolved by not thinking, by avoiding a face-to-face meeting with one's own mind. He emphasizes seeing suffering clearly, knowing its cause, cutting it off at the root, and realizing cessation. That is the path to liberation. Meditation is not a technique for temporary calm. It is a means for seeing truth clearly, so that defilements are transformed at the root. A simple example: someone insults you and you feel anger. Instead of examining the reasons for the arising of anger, you choose not thinking. You sit down, try to drive out thoughts, and seek a blankness, so that anger is not felt. You may succeed, and the mind may quiet for a while, but the anger does not disappear. It is only covered by a temporary layer of stillness. When you meet that person again, or in a similar situation, anger rises again, perhaps even stronger. Defilements cannot be shooed away. They can only be transformed by wisdom. The Buddha teaches in the Satipatthana Sutta to contemplate body, feeling, mind, and phenomena diligently with mindful alertness in order to abandon covetousness and grief with regard to the world. This means facing body and mind directly, not running away. When painful thoughts arise, one should not try to think nothing, but rather observe the nature of thought, see clearly its impermanence, and recognize how greed, aversion, and delusion are operating. From that seeing, letting go happens naturally without force. A mind without discursive thinking is the result of investigative wisdom, not the result of avoidance. If thinking nothing occurs because one has clearly seen phenomena, then the mind is pure and collected. If thinking nothing happens out of fear of suffering, fear of facing oneself, a refusal to investigate, then the mind is weak and ignorant and cannot lead to liberation. Another distortion is the misuse of external means to achieve not thinking, such as relying on music tranquilizers or wrong concentration. These methods can numb the mind and create a sense of blankness, but they do not bring alert awareness, do not yield clear seeing, and do not uproot defilements. In short, not thinking is not the aim of meditation. The aim is to see the mind and to see thought clearly, so that we do not cling to thought, and the mind naturally becomes still and bright. Meditation is not the avoidance of thinking, but the clear seeing of the nature of thinking, by which we are freed from all bondage. Not thinking in meditation is not the destruction of the mind, it is mastery of the mind. In many meditative traditions, beginners often assume that practice means making the mind empty, free of any thought, and thus they develop a psychology of forcing struggling against their own thinking. They try every way to think nothing, forcing the breath, suppressing emotions, driving away thoughts, even despising ordinary thinking in daily life. What is the truth? The Buddha never taught the destruction of thought by sheer willpower. He taught looking straight at the mind and seeing the nature of thought clearly. From there, attachment is released, and the mind becomes quiet and bright on its own without needing to eradicate anything. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha teaches, just as a person standing on a riverbank need only open the hand, and the object being grasped will fall into the water, so too, by releasing, clinging, the mind settles by itself. There is no need to chase away thoughts, no need to force not thinking. One need only see that thought is impermanent, not self, not mine. Then the mind no longer clings to the stream of ideas, and discursive thoughts dissolve, like clouds vanishing in a clear sky. In practice, the crux is not thinking, but not being carried away by thinking, not identifying with it, not clinging to it. For example, when a thought arises, I'm not breathing correctly. Why isn't the mind calm if you are mindful? You see, this is a thought, simply a conditioned phenomenon arising and passing. There is no need to continue it, and no need to fight it. Just know it and let it go. Return to the breath, return to the body. Repeating this, the mind neither opposes thought nor follows it. Naturally, discursive thinking subsides. The mind becomes quiet without coercion. This is the core principle of meditation, mastering the mind through mindfulness, not through rigid will. The Buddha said the mind is like a child. the more you scold it, the more stubborn it becomes. The gentler and more caring yet steady you are, the more it listens. Likewise, the more you force the mind to think nothing, the more agitated it becomes, or worse, it falls into torpor. With mindfulness, the mind is guided gently. Discursive thoughts are not fed, and the mind quiets and brightens on its own without force. Meditation is not against thinking. It is mastery of thinking, knowing when it arises and when it ceases, not being dragged or dominated by it. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha teaches, when the mind has greed, one knows it has greed. When the mind has aversion, one knows it has aversion. When the mind is scattered, one knows it is scattered. When the mind is collected, one knows it is collected. The key here is clear, knowing, not eradication. When there is thorough knowing, the stream of mental activity naturally calms, and the mind returns to stillness, imbued with alert awareness. A simple everyday image sitting before the sea, as waves break upon the shore. You do not drive the waves away, nor despise them. You simply observe and gradually recognize that the nature of waves is to come and go. There is nothing to cling to. So it is with the mind, each thought is a wave. Mindfulness is the whole observation. When you are no longer caught by the waves, the surface of the mind sea becomes naturally calm, not because the waves are forced down, but because the winds of greed, aversion, and delusion no longer blow upon it. In that state, you see the mind not thinking, not because thought has been suppressed, but because there is no fuel to start it. The mind abides in the present, in the breath, the body, and sensations, while knowing is quietly present. This is proper, not thinking, a stillness, born of wisdom, not of avoidance or coercion. The Buddha calls this right concentration a mind that is pure, pliant, workable, and unattached. When such a mind operates in daily life, you do not have to think nothing all the time. You can think when needed, without being dragged by thought, and when thought is not needed, the mind returns to quiet, without proliferation. This is inner freedom, mastery of the mind, rather than forcing it into silence. In sum, in meditation, not thinking is not a target to achieve, but the natural result of seeing clearly, letting go, and mastering the mind through mindfulness. Do not annihilate the mind. Do not run from it. Live fully in the inner life, and the mind will settle and shine by itself, free of proliferation, full of alert awareness. In the next section, we will return to the central question, what do you think when you think nothing? We will think by way of knowing awareness and clarify that experience in the light of scripture and practice. After all the layers of analysis, practice, and contemplation, the question, what do you think when you think nothing, is no longer a paradox but a doorway into the mind's profound nature. We have seen that when coarse thought is absent, no inner speech, no clear images, yet the mind still knows reality distinctly. What is that knowing? Can it be called a kind of wordless thinking? And if so, with what are you thinking? The answer lies in the experience of knowing nature, also called awakened awareness. This knowing is unborn and undying, non-discriminative yet fully present. When you no longer think but still clearly know, the breath, bodily sensations, sounds, and light, that is not inferential knowing. It is direct knowing, like a mirror, reflecting everything without choosing and without interfering. In the Sutta Nikaya, when asked about the mind, the Buddha taught, the mind has no form or color, yet it is luminous, illuminating, and unattached. This is the primordial knowing, unobscured by delusive thoughts, that knows everything clearly without needing to think. When a practitioner attains tranquility, when coarse thinking ceases, yet clarity remains, that is the mind returning to knowing itself without the mediation of thought. So, what do you think when you think nothing? You are thinking by that very knowing, not through words or images, with no subject or object, yet clearly cognizing all phenomena arising and passing in the present. This is not a denial of thinking, but a going beyond conceptual thought, to see reality as it is, unstained by imagination, with nothing added or taken away without explanation. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha teaches contemplating body as body, feeling as feeling mind, as mind and phenomena, as phenomena with a mind free of clinging and grasping. In such contemplation, there is no longer I am thinking, or I am knowing, but only pure, direct knowing that does not create karma. This is thinking without initiating, thought knowing, functioning without attaching to any object. Zen masters often evoke images to describe this state, like the moon shining upon a crystal clear lake. No wind, no waves, only a quiet light pervading everywhere. The thinking that occurs when you think nothing is the radiance of the mind unclouded by delusion. It does not generate mental proliferation or lead to action, yet it illuminates all phenomena, allowing the practitioner to see clearly and thus not cling or suffer. Huineng, the renowned Chan master, taught the original mind is without thought, yet it illuminates the myriad dharmas. When there is no thinking, and yet one does not fall into non-knowing, that is the wondrous functioning of awakened awareness. This is precisely what the Buddha points to in meditative practice. The knowing present when nothing is being thought is not empty nullity. It is the faculty of lucid illumination, wordless wisdom, the essence of living experience. You can touch this state as well. When you are mindful in each action, thinking nothing yet knowing each step, each breath, each sensation, you are thinking by way of knowing. This is meditation in the midst of life. No need to enter a meditation hall or stop the world. Rather stop the inner proliferation, so that awakened awareness illumines everything without recourse to thought. In short, not thinking does not mean shutting down all mental activity. It is the cessation of proliferation, so that knowing can be fully present. And what do you think when you think nothing? You think by way of knowing, by wordless wisdom, by lucid illumination, where I and mind drop away, concepts fall silent, and reality is seen just as it island. In the next section, we will discuss how to apply this experience living awake in everyday life, not needing to be thoughtless all the time, but abiding in present, knowing so that every thought and action becomes meditation and inner freedom. Having explored the nature of thought, of knowing, and of the experience of not thinking in meditation, the most important question is how to apply this in daily life. Can we always think nothing to be at peace? Or is the core not about being perpetually without thought, but about living with wakeful knowing in each arising moment, so that whether thinking or not, the mind remains established, uncarried, unbound? First, a practical point: thinking is a natural part of human life. The Buddha never taught that we must eradicate all thought to live. Without thought, we could not work, communicate, plan, or teach. The Buddha himself thought, yet he thought with awareness, spoke with mindfulness, and everything he did served the transformation of suffering and did not create unwholesome karma. Therefore, the goal is not to be forever without thought, but to live awake with every thought, to see it arise, persist, and pass, not to cling or identify. Mindfulness is the bridge between meditation and life. When mindfulness is present, whether one is thinking or not, the mind remains free, unpulled, and untroubled. For example, while washing dishes, instead of daydreaming, you know clearly that your hand holds a bowl, water is flowing, coolness touches the skin. In that moment you are not thinking, and yet you are far from unaware, you are living with simple knowing. Or when planning your work, the mind is thinking, but you know clearly what you are thinking. You are not swept away by worry or lost in fantasy. This is meditation in action, wakefulness in the stream of life. The Buddha taught that one established in mindfulness abides in meditation, whether in the forest or in the marketplace. Meditation is not confined to a quiet hut. It is living with awareness in each breath, each step, each word. When awareness is present, not thinking is meditation, and right thinking is also meditation, because both are illumined by non-clinging knowing, free from self-grasping and bondage. Living awake, you discover you need not avoid thought, nor chase a thoughtless state as liberation. Thought becomes a tool in the service of mindfulness when you master it. Without awareness, thought becomes chains that bind stirring restlessness and fantasy. Thus, inner freedom lies not in whether there is thought, but in how you meet thought with clear knowing, without attachment or grasping. With steady mindfulness, the mind quiets when appropriate and thinks when needed, and neither disturbs you like a river that flows, while the moon's reflection remains undisturbed. A still mind amid the world is the aim of meditation, not fleeing into blankness, but living reality with spacious, liberated knowing. In sum, to live awake is not to be always without thought, but to know clearly what you are thinking and doing, releasing attachment to every arising. Then the mind is light and unbound. Whether thinking or not knowing remains present and illumines all phenomena, and that is peace in the midst of life. After a long, deep inquiry and practice, the question, what do you think when you think nothing, is no longer a paradox or word game. It becomes a key that opens the door of meditation and wakefulness. Understanding is one thing, direct experience is decisive. Only through direct experience do we see our mind's nature and discern how thoughtless with awareness differs from thoughtless in dimness. Only by living in wordless knowing do we truly abide in inner freedom. Now try a simple experiment right here and now. You don't need to do anything special. Just sit still, relax your whole body, and bring attention to the breath. Do not adjust the breathing. Simply know the breath coming in and the breath going out. When the mind produces a thought like, am I doing this right? Is this the correct breath? Don't push the thought away. Just see clearly that it has arisen and gently return to the breath. You may notice the mind thinking less and less, the gaps between thoughts growing longer, and then perhaps a moment appears in which nothing is being thought. No inner speech, no images, only the breath and a quiet knowing. This is a golden opportunity to observe in that moment. Is the mind completely empty, or is there still something that knows? If you recognize, I am not thinking, and I clearly know I am not thinking, that is wordless knowing present and awake. You don't need to name it or grasp it. Simply remain in that alert presence without forcing, without expecting. This is an initial meditative stillness. The mind is quiet, but not dull without thought, yet still knowing, not thinking, yet not non-knowing. If your mind suddenly becomes busy and thoughts return, don't worry. Just know that a thought has arisen then. Let go lightly and return to the breath or to sensing the body. Meditation is not about holding on to no thought, but about seeing each thought arise and pass, then returning to the present, abiding in knowing. You can also try this in daily life with mindful walking. With each step, you don't think anything, yet you know clearly that you are stepping. You hear a sound without naming it, you simply know there is sound. You sense light and fragrance, no analysis, no commentary, just complete, knowing like a mirror that reflects. This is walking meditation, meditation in the midst of life, where knowing operates without words, without initiating thought, without clinging. A deeper experiment. When an unpleasant emotion appears, instead of thinking about it, feel it directly in the body. Know the tightness, the heat, the discomfort. No thoughts, yet a clear alertness. In that moment, you are not thinking in the sense of having no inner speech, yet you are living fully, with what is present without running away, without resisting. Knowing is illuminating the pain. From that illumination, the pain subsides, without the need for explanation. In these simple moments, you will recognize that thoughtless awareness is peace, inner freedom, meditation, woven into life. There is no need to separate yourself from living, no need to abandon work or family. Simply nurture present knowing so that every thought, action, and silence is lit by alertness. Living with this, knowing you do not need to think nothing to find peace, because even in thought, you are not carried away. When thinking is needed, you think with awareness. When it isn't, the mind settles on its own. This is freedom in the midst of life, not bound by proliferating thoughts, not obsessed with any particular state. So what do you think when you think nothing? You think by way of wakefulness, by wordless knowing, by a quiet wisdom that illuminates everything without discrimination and without grasping. It is living wholly in the present, not governed by the past, not anxious about the future. Living like a clear stream free of dust and debris, yet always flowing. As this journey closes, you might ask yourself in the quiet, right now, what am I thinking? If nothing, what am I knowing? And what is that knowing? From there, return to yourself, not to theory or abstraction, but to a still, lucid and free awareness. That is the wholesome, that is the Dhamma, that is the nature